All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We had a small little glitch this morning with our connection, so we're going to get started in just a second. All right, Robert, thank you for joining us. We're going to get started in just a second. All right, everyone, welcome to our day 28 of our spirit segment. We had a bit of a glitch earlier today, but we are back and we're going to head and get started. Again, I mentioned today is day 28 of our spirit segment, and I am your host today, Rafaela. And it's been a great journey so far in our spirit segment. And we're going to go ahead and get started. So today we're going to be talking about African spirituality and what it is and what it isn't. So it should be an interesting journey. And we're going to be uncovering some hidden messages of the subject matter. All right, so before we get started, the opinions expressed on this presentations are those of the presenter. They do not purport to reflect the opinions or views of 30-Day Redemption or its members, officers, or advertisers. All right, so decoding African spirituality. So a lot of us tend to want to know about our African traditions and African history, simply because, for the obvious reasons, we came from, a lot of us that came to the Americas came from most of us was transported through slaves, and therefore want to know what it is of our traditions and our history. So most of us that were transported, most of our ancestors rather, that were transported via slave trade, most of the history was lost. And so we begin this conversation talking about history loss. So if we're talking about history, we have to go back in time. So many look, like I mentioned before, many look to African spirituality and African history as a way to reconnect in order to find a sense of identity. Again, because we don't know where we came from, our history, we tend to go towards African spirituality because it is the most accessible, it is the most alive, and a lot of us tend to go towards that direction when we're looking for our roots. So as I mentioned, if we were going to talk about African spirituality, we have to talk about where we came from. As you can see, as you're familiar, the transatlantic slave trade that happened between 1650 and 1860, approximately 10 to 15 millions were transported. So as you can see, most of them came from the Congo and also Angola. A lot of them went towards Brazil, or mostly South America, mostly Brazil. And the northeastern part of Brazil, about 5 million Africans were transported to Brazil alone. As you can see here, also 4.5 million were transported to the West Indies, or we like to call the Caribbean. A lot of them came to work on tobacco plantations, coffee plantations, cotton, but mostly sugar plantation and also mining. Some of them did come to work in rice plantation as well. So as you can see, many of them came towards South America, and then they were transported mostly to North America, which got about 0.5 million slaves, or Africans in this case, in the Americas. So the number of slaves in America was much, much lower than other parts of the Western world. So most of them were brought from Angola, Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo. The ones that came from the Congo went mostly to the area of Brazil. Then you have Senegal, which is up here, Guinea-Bissau, Sierra Leone, okay? And then what we like to call the Bight of Biafra, which is this area right here where you find Nigeria, Cameroon, and the Gabon, okay? It is believed that the last group came mostly from Nigeria to the northern part of Brazil. Let's see here. And so the transport of slaves was abolished in 1836 by Britain. However, the Portuguese continued until 1888. So as you can see, Brazil, the Portuguese continued to transport slaves, even though it was abolished. They continued to do it for about 50 some years after the transport of slaves was abolished. So because of that last group that came from Nigeria, one of the cultures that became very prominent in Brazil, or the culture that was able to be preserved, was the one of Nigeria. So today we're going to be focusing on the Yoruba people, which is people from Nigeria, because again, like I mentioned, they were the last ones to be transported. So who are the Yoruba people? So the Yoruba people are an ethnic group that inhabits Western Africa, mainly Nigeria, Benin, Togo, and part of Ghana. The Yoruba people constitute about 88 million people within Nigeria and over 100 million people worldwide. The vast majority of this population is from Nigeria, where the Yoruba people make up to 24% of the country's population, which making them one of the largest ethnic groups in Africa. Most Yoruba people, they speak the Yoruba language, which is the Niger-Congo language with the largest number of native speakers. So as you can see, they are the reason why a lot of people tend to gravitate to wanting to find their roots, and they go through that process because, again, the Yoruba people are one of the largest group in Africa. So what do they believe? What are their beliefs? So the Yoruba people believe in one God, which they call Olodumare, is also known as Olorun, which means Almighty, and is the name given to one of the three manifestations of Supreme God or Supreme Being. Olodumare's name comes from the words Odu, Mare, and Oni, which translate as the owner of the source of creation. So when it comes to human creation, The Yoruba people in Nigeria believe that the human creation or personality has two main elements. There's the physical and the spiritual. So the physical element of a person is collectively known as Ara, which means body, a creation of Ori Sanla, the Yoruba of God of creation. As I mentioned before, the manifestation of Olodumare is in three, similar to what you find in Christian belief, who is charged by Olodumare, which is the God of heaven, who is responsible for the creation of Imi, which is so. Okay. And then there's Ahala, which is the potter who molds human physical heads in heaven, but is also responsible for the creation of Ori. And Ori means your inner head, meaning it's not your physical head or the brain or the things that you have in your head that you can physically see. So Ori means your head, it means your thoughts, your mind, right? Or your personality. And we're going to discuss a little bit what Ori means and what its purpose of it. So, does the human personality consist of Ara, which is body, and Mi, which is soul, and which also can be classified as spirit, and the Ori, which is your inner head. Okay. So, what is the meaning of Ori? Ori means inner head. Like I said, it's not a physical head where, things that you can see, your brain you can touch, but is your inner head, your thoughts, your personality, your destiny. So Ori literally means head, refers to one's spiritual intuition and destiny. It is reflective spark of human consciousness embedded into human essence, and therefore is often personified, or in this case, represented as an Orisha. Okay. And as I'm going to go over a little bit, a lot of people that when they go into African spirituality, they tend to connect to what they call an Orisha, which they think is most people think is a deity or a god. But we're going to define what an Orisha is. Okay. So Orishas. So Orishas are just divine qualities based on your lifestyle or your character and what personality you choose to manifest. Now, many believe that you come to know your Orisha through divination or religious manifestation, which is not true. So you will see in a lot of African spirituality or African tradition, especially within South America, which we're going to take a look in just a second, that an Orisha is a deity or a god or sometimes goddess that you worship, that you connect to or serve in order to find out what your destiny is, or to find out what path you need to take in life. So a lot of people believe that an Orisha is something that you invoke, that you worship, or that you do offerings and sacrifices to. But no, an Orisha, coming from the word Ori, means it's just a quality that is based on your lifestyle and your character and what your personality is to manifest. So many of us, and we're going to break down some Orishas in just a second, many of us have, when we are born, we have a set of personality, we have a purpose, we have things that we're born with naturally, that sometimes people don't even have to tell us what profession or what things we need to follow, because it is naturally within us, right? So I want to talk about some Orishas that there are many of them. So it's believed to have about 400, more than 400 of them. But I brought just about 6 that we can discuss today. And what do they mean? Again, so these are just images, okay, that represent some of these Orishas. And as we go through them, I want you to start thinking about, again, these are not Orishas that you worship, although most people look at these images and they look at them and you will find, if you go on Google, if you do some research, what you're going to find is the worship of these images. But these images really represent certain character traits, certain personalities that, according to the Yoruba people, each person is born with an Ori, it means your personality and how it's manifested in your life. Okay. So the first one, for example, is Ogun. He's believed to be a warrior. He's also a hunter, a blacksmith, technology, mechanical engineer. So a person, what the Yoruba people might say, that is guided, the Ori is guided by Ogun. Their personality are people that are either they're doing hunting, people that create, like blacksmith, that make weapons of war, right? Some of them go into technology. A lot of them goes into mechanical engineers. So if you are a person who likes technology, who does mechanical things, which means that your personality, your character is, and your Orisha is Ogun, right? Then you have Shango, which is justice, represents justice, war. So people that go into law, people who are soldiers, police officers, or even activists, right? Anybody who is seeking, naturally have the tendency to go into these fields, meaning that your Ori, your personality naturally is of Shango, right? Then you have Oya, which represents entrepreneurship, community economy, change, money, circulation. So as you can see, if you're able to see the picture of Oya, you see thunder and lightning, or sometimes hurricane. So when you think about hurricane and wind, there's also something as a change coming, something that's being transformed. So Oya represents entrepreneurship, and it represents community economy. So anybody who's trying to create an economy, or trying to build, for example, stores or businesses in your community in order to help your community. So you might want, the consideration is your Ori might be Oya, right? Then you have Oshun, which I think is one of the most popular in the world because of its beauty. And a lot of people connect Oshun with beauty and fertility. Now, the interesting thing about fertility is that it's creativity, right? You're birthing something. And so Oshun represents film, fashion, advertising, creativity, and beauty. Okay. So for those of you that are into fashion, are into creating beauty products or doing advertising, that means your Ori, your personality, is of Oshun. Then you have Yemanja, which is meditation, field of energy, healing, intercessors. So people that work for the better of humanity, people that work in energy field, maybe yoga, anything that has to do with the healing and meditation is considered Ori Yemanja. Then you have Osain, which is herbal medicine. People that go into the medical field, who become pharmacists or holistic nutrition, okay? So it means your Ori, your personality, your character is of Osain, okay? So these are just some of the Orishas, or what I like to call your Ori, or your character, or the characters according to Yoruba tradition or Yoruba people that exist. Again, these are things that are not to be worshipped, but yet developed or evolved. Okay. So, and again, and if you want to look up, there are many of them. These are just 6 that I came up with, just to kind of give you an example of, that they exist. Okay. But they were not intended to be worshipped. They were not intended to be, is nothing as something that lives outside of you. Okay. Now, religious beliefs, as I mentioned, implies that you come to know your Orisha through divination, as you will find in most Latin American countries or the Caribbean, that the only way that you can actually know your Orisha, or your personality, or your Ori, which is your inner self, is through divination. But this is just to get you to believe that an Orisha lives outside of you and not as a personality trait. Okay. So if one must know, what is your Orisha? What is my personality? Think about the things that comes to you naturally. What do you do naturally that implies this is what my personality or my destiny is. Okay. So for example, I'm an entrepreneur, right? And so, what my personality will be, oh yeah, not now. With that being said, I'm not going to go worship a divinity that's called, oh yeah. I'm just going to manifest or tap into that personality so that I can become a better entrepreneur, so that I can create more community. Now, can someone have more than one? Absolutely. You can actually have more than one OD or more personality. You can do different things. Some people might be entrepreneurs, but they also might be artists. So you can have more than one. Okay. So what happened? How did, through such tradition where these things were looked at from that perspective as a trade, how did it turn into something that people worship or something that people practice sacrifices to? Well, according to those people are people of faith, but that which is made with hand is cursed, as well it as he that made it, because he made it, and it because being corruptible, it was called God. So this comes from Wisdom of Solomon 14:8. And also in the Bible says, who changed the truth of God into a lie and worship and serve the creature more than a creator. So as with a lot of things that you see, not so much, not just the Yoruba people, but you see it in a lot of different religions, a lot of people take what is a creation and begin to worship that which was created. So these people are taking your own personality traits and begin to worship as if it is something or a god. So how did that came to be in the Western culture? So there's something called syncretism, okay? And syncretism is the reconciliation of different beliefs. Comes from 1610s from the French syncretism, and directly from modern Latin syncretismus, used by German Protestant theologian David Perius, 1615. Also from Greek syncretismos, union of communities, from syncretizian, to combine against or a common enemy. Okay, second element of certain orange. 1-3 connects it with cretismo, lying. Interesting. From critizen, to lie like a cretin. Another connects it to the stem of keranyan, to mix, to blend. Okay. So what happened, I don't know if you can see my photo over here on the right. This is a woman who practiced what we're going to go over in just a second, called Candomblé, and she's in front of a Catholic church. And this is the Church of Bonfim in Bahia, which is known for its a mix of the Candomblé, which is a African-Brazilian religion, Afro-Brazilian religion, and Catholicism. Now, what they practice in Candomblé is just, they took the Yoruba Orishas and they worship the Orishas. So this is just what they call the lavagem, which means the cleaning of the church. And they are cleaning it, giving honor to the Orishas, which is supposed to be their own personality, or the personality or your Ori, your head, but they're doing it as if they are something to be worshipped. So there is that syncretism, that mix, okay? So I'm gonna show you a quick video of what that looks like as they're entering the actual church. All right, as you can see, that is the people who practice what we call candomblé, entering the church to pay, like I said, enter a Catholic church to pay homage to what they believe to be deities, but are not. Okay. Now, because of syncretism, what religions were actually formed? Okay. As you just noticed, as you just witnessed in Brazil, candomblé, okay, which is a mixture of Yoruba faith and also Catholicism, okay? And then you have, they also call it candomblé in Colombia, again, a mixture of a Yoruba faith or what the Yoruba people believe with also Catholicism. Then you have in Haiti, they call it voodoo. Again, a mixture of Yoruba faith and Catholicism. All right. And then you have in Trinidad, they call it Shango or Bea, which is again a mix of Yoruba faith and Catholicism. All right. So this is what syncretism, how they were able to maintain. So what happened was, because of syncretism, because of Yoruba belief, again, Yoruba belief was not a religion. It was not a religion. These are just ways that they were able to maintain who, so they won't, when we're talking about connecting with your African spirituality, who you are, where you come from, a lot of them, because they understood that your Ori or your Orisha, who you are, like who you become in terms of personality, needed to be maintained and not forgotten, okay? And the only way they were able to maintain the tradition, not, or rather not forget who they are or their traditions, they had to look for certain saints. Again, these saints are not, these are people that lived, and I'll go over in just a second, okay? That represented or connected to a Ori or an Orisha, okay? So that's how they were able to maintain their tradition and what they believe in. Now, of course, because of syncretism, because of influences, that got mixed with worship, okay? Just like everything else, all right? So you have here Ogun, which we talked about earlier, which is blacksmith, drivers, technology, right? So he's known to make things like metal things. And then you have St. George, who was a warrior who was believed by Catholic beliefs to have killed a dragon, okay? And he used a sword that is the same type of sword that is the same type of material that was the sword of Ogun, okay? Who was also a warrior. So the Yoruba people, in order for them to preserve, because remember, in the Western world, they weren't allowed to practice their beliefs. So in order for them to maintain it, they had to actually find a Catholic representation in order for them to maintain their belief, okay? Again, all of them have one. I'm just gonna talk about two today. So Oya, which we talked about earlier, entrepreneurship, the thunder and lightning represents, change and destroy and start over again, right? Communal. So in Catholicism, the way they were able to maintain, through Catholicism images was through Saint Barbara. Now, Saint Barbara, when you look at it, say, okay, what does Saint Barbara have to do with Oya? I'm seeing the sword, but I'm not seeing it in lightning. Well, the story of Saint Barbara, again, which was a human being that lived, was known for, she believed in the Trinity. And her father, because back then there are some parts of the world where you can only believe in the Father and the Son and not the Holy Spirit. So she believed in the Trinity, and her father, because of it, had her beheaded. So the day that she was being beheaded in public, a lightning came and struck her father. So because of it, she was then canonized as a saint, okay? because of the correlation. So when the Yoruba people needed to maintain the Ori or Orisha of Oya, they looked to a similarity in in Catholicism. In this case, Saint Barbara had a similar story. It is represented in Catholicism as Oya. Okay. Again, all of these are worship, things that are being worshiped. But again, when it comes to the Catholicism, these are human beings that lived just like all of us. But as the Catholic Church, they canonized and made them saints or things that people pray to. Likewise, Ogun Oya, which are Orisha, meaning your personality, not something that lives outside of you, was then, begin to be worshiped, just like the Catholic saints. So what is the danger of when we are looking to understand African spirituality or looking to connect to our African roots? And, one of the things that I always notice is that a lot of people tend to go to Africa or the Caribbean to connect to that history, to connect to that understanding. Because what I normally like to say is that Brazil and the Caribbean are the gateways to Africa. They're the gateways to, they're the quickest to get to, of course, but it's a gateway before actually going or not the gateway, but rather the bridge of going to Africa. So what is the danger of tapping into these traditions that we're looking at? We're thinking, oh, they're living their African experience, or they're still connected to their roots. But because they're not being connected in the way that it's supposed to be, what is the danger of that? Okay. So the danger of that is that you are exposed to different things like witchcraft. A lot of these practices are tapping into a spirit world. And some of them, depending on what part of the world that you are, they do, because it is syncretism, is not so much just Catholicism. They also bring in different types of practices into these religions. So some of them could be witchcraft. You can also are exposed to demon possession. Okay. I've seen where people who practice it possessed with spirits that they don't even know what it is. For example, there was a case where someone who began to practice candomblé or went into the practice of candomblé, when they decided they wanted to leave, they no longer wanted to be part of it. They were actually thrown back and forth within their homes to the wall. Okay, so they were possessed with a spirit. And so you have to be very, very careful, when you talk about African spirituality connected to your roots. I'm connecting to, that you're opening yourself up to possession of spirits that you don't know. Okay. Another example, and most of you might know this, and she openly talks about it, and that's Ayala Vincent, who practiced Yoruba for many years. And she decided with her first husband that she was going to get married, but through initiation, Yoruba African initiation. And so what happened many years after that, when she got divorced and her husband moved on with his life, she would begin to have these scenes. She would see scenes of her husband with his new wife, right? Every time they were connected, when they were doing their relations, she would then feel everything, experience and see. So she actually had to go undo it, okay? Because they were connected through that ritual. So you have to be very careful when you're wanting to search or connect to African spirituality, what it is that you're tapping into. Okay. You're also exposed to the divination, to the spirit of divination, So these are some of the things that you can be exposed to when looking towards African spirituality. Okay. Now, then the question becomes, well, what can I do? Like, I really want to be able to connect to my roots. I want to find out where I came from. What did my where it originated from. Okay. I will start having conversation with family members. You'll be surprised what they know. You'll be surprised of how much history they have. My uncle, for example, before passing away, I come from a family of 24 musicians. And my uncle began to teach at a university music. And he began to do research, and he was researching for a few years. And he finally discovered that our family came from the Congo, because Nigeria, as I mentioned earlier, is so common, it's so popular. Most believe that everybody in Brazil came from Nigeria, right? But we actually came from the Congo, which made sense, as I showed earlier with the map. A lot of the Congolese people went towards Rio, which is, where I'm from. So we discovered that we came from the Congo, from the Congolese people. So have conversations with your family members. Trace the origins of your last name. That was one of the ways that my uncle was able to discover, because the last name of the family, he was able to trace back the origins of it. Okay. Now, if you don't have any family members who knows or understands or have no idea, DNA, I don't necessarily recommend, but if those people that are interested, I know a lot of people do DNA testing, at least to find out what part of the world they're from, or part of Africa they're from. Okay. And ancestry organizations. I know Henry Louis Gates Jr., who does a show on PBS called Finding Your Roots, where he does DNA testing, and there's a lot of research in finding like a lot of the famous people roots, where they came from. Okay. And research. For those who are really interested in discovering and finding out, you can always do research. Okay. So I know we had some difficulties earlier today, but I'm going to go ahead and open up for question and answer, for Q&A. If anybody have any question, if you were able to either listening from YouTube, and I'll go ahead and stop my screen share, because I know some of you are watching it from YouTube. And if you have any question, you can go ahead and unmute your mic, or send the questions via YouTube. Hi, Randolph.
I got a question.
Yes.
Hey,
Hi.
I always wanted to know, hi, everybody keeps talking about the number of slaves that died in that Middle Passage. Sometimes I get a number of 11 million, 70 million, and I just can't understand how that's possible, based on the number of people in this country and things like that. What number have you, because I'm like, how many boats had to leave for you to lose 11 million people? Did you leave 10 boats a day? And, like it took 30 days to get here. The number just seems confusing to me. So any idea with that?
Yeah. So in total, 15 million were transported. It is believed that 10 million actually survived. So we're talking about 5 million people who didn't make it. And you have to remember that it was for an extended period of time. So it wasn't like in 1 year. We're talking about years and years. I mean, years and years, over 300 years of transporting. Okay, we're talking about 1650 to 1888, which was the last shipment. So we're talking about from 1650 to, well, they say 1860, but rather Brazil continued to do it until 1888. So that is over 200 years of transporting. So it's not something that just happened within a few years. We're talking about 200 years of transporting people. That's 2 centuries.
I'm nodding with agreement and appreciation of your answer, but I guess you can't see that. So I'm like, okay, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep researching that number as well, just to kind of, because the number just seems overwhelming. Like I'm saying,
it is overwhelming, but we're talking about a lot of years.
Yeah.
A lot of years for 15 million people to, it's a lot of years. So it's something that just didn't happen. Now, in terms of how many boats, that I don't know. But it's definitely a lot of years of transporting.
One last thing. I don't know if Iyanla Vanzant had to marry her husband to experience that. thing that you experience. It may be just a human, instead of African spirituality, it might be a human thing when you're connected to somebody. You know,
Well, this is according to her. This is something that she shared.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, if it's something that can happen to anybody, I'm not quite sure, but this is something she specifically shared in regards to her Yoruba background and what she had to do to undo it. She had to go undo it. So this is something that she actually shared that she had to undo because of how she got married and them connected. So they had to actually go back to Africa to undo it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else have any questions?
I said thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Or any comments? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and if anybody have any questions, if anybody want to put something on the chat, I'm going to go ahead and fire up the slide one more time. Apologize for the for this morning or this early with the beginning of the presentation. We had some issues with some technical issues, so I'm going to go ahead and fire up here. And want to say thank you for those who joined in today. We are, like I said, continue this journey. Tomorrow will be day 29, a couple of more days before we finish. And, for those of you who are in the journey, please continue to share the message of 30-day redemption with your family, with your friends. And, we have what I think today about 58 videos today. And if you haven't watched any of the others, go to our Facebook page, watch the replays. But again, thank you so much for joining us today and have a great rest of your Sunday.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.